This is the second part in the episode on how to hold a longsword. If you have not seen the first part, please go and watch it now. The link is in the description. Do you know that the incorrect examples are exaggerated on purpose so the issues are easier to see? In my opinion, the correct examples properly show what they are meant to show. However, they are not in any way perfect. As an exercise, see if you can spot any issues with my form in the correct examples. If you do, please leave a comment down below. Now that we are properly up to speed, let's get to the first proper exercise of this series. This exercise combines the information from the first part of this episode and the previous episode to a simple exercise to test your structure and grip. Before you do any of these exercises, remember to warm up properly. All of the progressions of the following exercise have the same starting position. Let's see how to form that. As we have already gone through the in-depth explanations on how to form a proper stance and how to hold and grip a sword, I'll just give a short reminder on those. If you need a long reminder, please refer to the first part of this episode and the previous episode. Let's start with a proper fencing stance. Have your dominant foot forward. Remember to have a good wide stance with your knees bent. You probably should have a wider and deeper stance than you think. Front foot's toes pointing forwards, back foot's angled to the side so that the stance feels comfortable. Have your weight evenly distributed on both legs. Hold your sword in a proper handshake grip straight in front of you at shoulder height. You want to have your both arms properly extended. To achieve this, you need to rotate your shoulders so that the dominant shoulder is slightly forward. Make sure that the sword is correctly centered. Now, just by rotating your shoulders, bring the sword over your head. You should do this so that the center of mass is roughly above your head. This makes holding the sword easier. Loosen your grip so that you don't tire your hands. This can be done by undoing the ringing motion by letting your wrists rotate away from each other. Do not let the point sag behind. Make sure that your shoulders are in a neutral position. Make sure that you have a neutral spine and hip positions and that you are not leaning in any direction. You are now standing in the starting position of the following exercise. With this exercise, we also start to familiarize ourselves with the concept of start simple, add complexity. The exercise is designed so that the later progressions build on the earlier ones. This makes it possible to have a smaller subset of things to concentrate in the first progression. Then the following things add more moving parts. In other words, add more things you need to pay attention to. When you move to a new progression or new exercise, you should no longer need to pay as much attention to the things that you focused on the previous one. This allows you to pay more attention to the new things introduced in this new, more challenging variation. This means that in some cases, for example this one, you should no longer do the previous progressions or the previous exercise of the same thing after you have moved to the next one. In fact, sometimes these earlier, simpler versions of an exercise might be simplified so much that they actually teach you bad habits if you do them too much. When either of these cases is true, I will specifically mention it. Now, let's get on with the first progression of the exercise. Stand in the starting position. Tighten your grip using the ringing technique. Brace your core. Now, slowly lower the sword down in a completely vertical line. The rotation must be around your shoulders. Continue until you cannot bring your arms lower without bending your elbows. Stop bracing and untighten your grip. Return to the starting position. Repeat. With this progression, you should concentrate on the following things. Having a full extension of your arms. Maintaining a proper grip. Keeping the sword centered and having the edge aligned. Standing straight and not leaning. Having your shoulders in a neutral position. Bracing your core. Here are some common problems with this progression and how to fix them. Pushing your shoulders up in the starting position and forwards during the cut. Simply relax your shoulders. In general, when cutting you should keep your shoulders as relaxed as possible. If you push your shoulders forward during the cut, you can think as pulling them down and back. This activates your upper back muscles, stabilizing your shoulders. There can be multiple reasons for this to happen, and it can be any combination of them. The most common ones are a loose grip and leaning forwards. If the tip hits the ground and you can lift it up by tightening your grip, this is a gripping issue. Leaning forwards is rather easy to see from the side, so ask someone to watch you cut or take a video. This might also be caused by you bending your elbows. If you bend your elbows, your arms will not come in contact with your chest, stopping the cut. If you do all the things mentioned previously correctly and you still hit the ground, it is possible that you have a sword which is too long for you. In my opinion, a long sword should be short enough that you can do this exercise properly without hitting the ground. This might happen if you are using a sword with a too long handle, such as many feathers. You can somewhat compensate for this by moving your hands back on the grip. However, this will affect the handling of the sword. In my opinion, a sword with such a long handle is not optimal for cutting and body mechanics training. This might also happen because you bent your elbows. Edge alignment issues are generally caused by uneven gripping technique. Trajectory issues are generally caused by twisting the torso to one side, leaning to one side, or pulling with one of the arms. These are rather easy to notice from the front, so once again, ask someone to watch while you are doing the exercise or take a video of yourself doing the exercise. You can also do these in front of a reflective surface, such as a mirror or a window. After you can do this progression of the exercise correctly, you should move on to the next progression. This is one of the cases in which you should not come back to this progression after moving to the next one. As explained in the why and how to train cutting, slow is not fast. Because of this, it is possible to form bad habits during this exercise. The link to the mentioned episode is in the description. Now, let's move to a more difficult progression of this exercise. Once again, stand in the start position, tighten your grip and brace your gore. Now, just bring your hands forward enough that the sword can cut down in a vertical line on its own. Don't speed the cut up or try to slow it down. The cut should come to a stop when your arms come in contact with your chest. This way, your structure stops the cut and you don't have to try to slow the cut down with your muscles. With this exercise, you should concentrate on the following things. Not slowing the cut down with your muscles. Just let the cut come down on its own and be stopped by your structure. Maintaining a proper grip on the sword. Keeping the sword centered and the edge aligned. Standing straight and not leaning. Bracing your core. Most of the common problems with this progression are the same as with the previous one. In addition to that, now that the sword comes down with more speed, it is more likely that your structure fails so that it allows the tip to hit the floor. Use the previously mentioned ways to determine the exact issue. If you have issues with your grip, make sure to go back and watch the first half of this episode again. The most common grip issue is that your forearms are not in line with the sword. You also want to have your hands touching each other so that they can support each other. Issues with either of these will cause the pommel to come up between your forearms and the tip hitting the floor. The major new issue with this progression is that you are trying to slow the cut down using your muscles. Be sure to concentrate on keeping your shoulders relaxed and just allowing the sword to come down on its own. Continue doing this progression until your structure is good enough that the sword does not hit the floor. You must also be able to allow the sword to come down on its own without slowing it down with your muscles. Instead, allow your structure to stop the cut. After you are able to move on to the final progression of this exercise, there is usually no need to come back to this one. Let's take a look at the final progression of this exercise. Once again, start in the start position, tighten your grip and brace your core. This time you want to actually power the cut using your lats to bring the sword down. Again, do not use your muscles to slow the cut down, you must let your structure do the work for you. Start slowly and incrementally add more power to the cut as long as you are able to maintain your structure. If your structure starts to break down, reduce the power of the cuts until your structure holds. Then again start slowly adding more power to the cut until your structure almost starts to break. Keep doing this progression until you can cut down at full speed. You should return to this progression of this exercise every now and then to make sure that your structure is keeping up with your power generation. When you start training body mechanics and cutting, it is rather common that your power generation starts to increase rapidly. It is completely possible that the muscles stabilizing your structure can't keep up with your increasing power generation. Now that you are actually powering the cut, you should start to hear the sword wind. For a more detailed explanation, please see the why and how to train cutting episode. The link is in the description. If you can't hear the sword wind, there are two main suspects. Either your edge is not aligned or your tip velocity is not high enough. Edge alignment issues are most often caused by an uneven grip. The required tip velocity should not be that difficult to achieve. If your tip speed is too low, it is most likely an issue with your extension. Remember to keep your arms straight and have a proper handshake grip. People often start the cut by pulling their elbows down and bending them. This breaks the structure and without proper extension, the tip speed will be low. The same thing happens if you hold the sword too close to a 90-degree grip. After you start to hear the sword wind, it should be as consistent throughout the cut as possible. If the sword wind starts late in the cut, it means you are not accelerating the cut fast enough. If the sword wind stops clearly before the end of the cut, it means you are slowing the cut down too early. Because of this, it is important that you let your structure stop the cut instead of trying to slow it down using your muscles. The probability of trajectory issues also increases. They are most often caused by uneven rotation from your shoulders or by twisting your shoulders. By uneven rotation from the shoulders, I mean that you are bringing one of your arms down faster than the other. When done against a proper cutting medium, this exercise tests how straight your trajectory is, how even your grip is, how much power are you generating, and how much follow-through you have. The two cutting media I know this can be done with are clay and tatami. Sadly, I do not have access to clay, and I do not have a cutting stand which can hold the tatami in the way required. With tatami, you need to pile the tatami on top of each other as a wall, and you need a specialty stand for that. With a clay, you just get a big enough block of clay and cut straight down on it. If you do this exercise with a cutting medium, you want to look for three things. Is your cut straight or does it curve? Does your blade turn in the target? And 3. How deep do you cut? A curving trajectory can be caused by either an uneven grip or by the trajectory issues mentioned earlier. It is completely possible to have a straight trajectory when cutting air, but twisting your shoulders on impact so that with a target you actually have a curving trajectory. Blade twisting inside the target is most often caused by an uneven or a weak grip. The deeper you cut, the more power you generate and the better follow-through you have. I will shortly touch on specialty gripping techniques and how to make them as good as possible. I will be using the so-called thumb grip of the German longsword systems as an example, as it is something I have a lot of training time with. The way of holding and gripping the sword, explained previously in this episode, is the most optimal one. Basically, you have your whole body behind the cutting trajectory, which makes it relatively easy to hold a proper structure. This helps especially with follow-through. The idea behind specialty gripping techniques is to achieve some kind of an advantage, whether it is a mechanical or a tactical one. Generally speaking, thumb grip allows one of two things. It either allows you to close a line of an incoming attack while delivering an attack of your own, or it allows a non-traditional cutting line around the defenses of your opponent. However, as mentioned earlier, the way of traditionally holding the sword is structurally the most optimal one. With a specialty grip, in exchange for gaining an advantage, you are giving up some of your structure. A specialty gripping technique which gives away too much and gains too little, or gains nothing, makes no sense in the first place. With a specialty technique, you should aim to achieve as much of the normal grip strength as possible. Aim for a sturdy grip and locked out elbows and wrists. Try to maximize your reach with a large angle between the sword and your arms and with properly extended elbows. Have your forearms in line with the grip and the cutting trajectory. Have the rotation around your spine. Now do the thumb grip example. The thumb grip simply means that you rotate the sword 90 degrees in your hands so that the edges point to the sides instead of backwards and forwards. The name simply comes from the fact that when gripping like this, most people tend to have their thumb laying on the flat of the blade. Here you can immediately see that you are losing your ability to have your arms and in a sense your body behind the cutting trajectory. As the edges are now pointing to the sides of your arms instead of forwards and backwards, any impact on the edge will now try to rotate the sword around your wrist. It should be rather clear that this is not as structurally optimal as when the impact is trying to force the sword toward your forearms. However, we are still able to fulfill almost all of the other points. We can maximize our reach with a proper handshake grip, and we can have locked out elbows and wrists. Depending on how we are cutting, we can also have the rotation around our spine or at least around our shoulders. This was a very light touch on the subject of specialty gripping styles. However, it should be enough for you to adapt the basics of gripping theory to your specialty needs. We will be taking a closer look at the specialty techniques in the German longsword system in later episodes. They will be used as an example on how to adapt the basic cutting theory to specialty techniques. As with the previous episode, I have collected the issues with push and pull cuts into a single segment so that I don't have to talk about them constantly. As mentioned in the previous episode, another issue with push-pull cuts is that there is usually ulnar deviation of the wrist. You either need to have an extremely loose grip on the sword and allow the hilt to rotate in your hand, or rotate your wrist to get the point in line. If you have a loose grip, you are giving up any ability to control your edge alignment on impact. As the range of motion of the wrist on this plane is rather small, it is easy to rotate the wrist all the way to the end of range of motion or past it. This will subject your wrist to an increased risk of a sprain. It is especially bad as you are pulling the pommel of the sword with your other hand, thus increasing the already high strain on your wrist. As already mentioned multiple times, the muscles are stronger when they are not contracting. In this case, it is impossible to have retention on your forearm muscles to protect your wrist. This increases the risk of a strain. In my opinion, push-pull cuts are not in any way mechanically suitable to cut anything. In addition to that, you have the increased risk of an injury. And as said, if you are injured, you cannot train. Once again, Sword Stem has an excellent article on this. If you didn't read it after the previous episode, now would be a really good time. The link is in the description. Before we get into the recap, go and stab the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. A good grip allows proper extension and centering and allows maintaining the edge alignment. Have a proper handshake grip instead of a 90-degree grip. Have your hands close together near the crossguard. Do not hold the pommel. Use the ringing motion to tighten your grip and to bring your forearms in line with the sword. Have a relaxed grip when standing in a guard. Tighten your grip before or just as you start to cut. Relax your grip after you have finished the cut and need to transition to a guard or to a follow-up action. Do not try to add more power to the cut by gripping just as you are to hit a target or while hitting a target. It is not possible. A specialty grip should give you an advantage which outweighs the negatives. Do not push-pull.